Today, our guest is Ron DePinho, and we'll be talking about cancer, biotechnology, and some of the interactions that Ron has been having with the Pope and President Biden. Don't go away. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the CRUZAMENTO Podcast. In today's show, we'll talk about the intersection of technology, healthcare, and sustainability. My name is André Correia, and together with me is my friend and co-host, Daniel Guedelha.
Hello, and welcome to another show of CRUZAMENTO Podcast. Today, we have the big pleasure to have with us Ron DePinho. Hello, Ron, and very welcome to this show.
Bom dia.
Bom dia, Portuguese. So maybe we start with our very first question in 30 seconds. Who is Ron DePinho?
Well, I'm the son of Portuguese immigrants and have a passion for trying to convert knowledge into things that can help people lead healthier lives. I've devoted my life to cancer research, cancer care, and very interested in trying to improve the human condition. So that's my passion. More importantly, I'm the father of three children who I'm very proud of, and an amazing wife.
Ron, thank you very much for that introduction. And as you've mentioned, your family has a unique history, including your father's journey to the US. Could you share with us the story of how your father came to the US and how that experience has influenced your own path and perspective, especially in the context of healthcare, technology, and sustainability?
Thank you for asking that question. It's a very personal one, but one that I'm very happy to share. My parents were poor, uneducated, and my father, at the age of 17, traveled to Rio de Janeiro to try to live a better life and help the family back home because the opportunities were limited. And he was very entrepreneurial and did quite well in Brazil, but came to the United States. He was actually an illegal immigrant and came to the United States and started working and then eventually enlisted into World War II because he loved the United States and freedom and wanted to, do his part. And through that, he gained his U.S. citizenship, came back, eventually married my mother and started a life that was filled with good fortune. He worked very hard in construction, had his own company, so on and so forth. And then he ended up devoting his life to helping others because he recognized what it was like to be disadvantaged. So he was my hero. And then, as a cancer research, he developed colon cancer. And there was very little that I could do for him. This was now 25 years ago that he passed. And that had a profound impact. And it really changed my life in that I was not only interested in studying cancer, but converting knowledge into things that can actually reduce pain and suffering from cancer. So that was a big turning point in my life to try to really redouble my efforts to try to make an impact on the cancer problem.
And you have been having an impact, Ron. Thank you so much for sharing that very personal history. And let me pick on some words that you alluded to: working very hard from your father, helping others. Let's now go back to Ron and the MD Anderson Cancer Moonshot program you initiated became a model for the White House Cancer Moonshot, led by the President Obama and the Vice President at the time, Biden. Can you highlight to our audience key achievements and lessons from this program and its impact on cancer research, Ron?
Yes, and I think the context is important because when I became president of MD Anderson in 2011, we were at a true inflection point in the history of cancer science, where we had a confluence of knowledge, technologies, and so on, that if applied more systematically and deliberately, would have a huge impact on the cancer problem. And so, like the Moonshot program, I thought that it would be helpful to take the largest cancer center in the world with a global reach and vast resources to try to organize its efforts in a concerted way, rather than individual investigators doing their science, which is extremely important, by the way, but to also add a dimension of organized effort, unified behind areas of tremendous opportunity, and if resources and technology and multidisciplinary interactions could advance things forward, it would make an impact. And indeed, we did that. It was a $3 billion initiative, and our goal was to rapidly convert knowledge into drug development endpoints, policy endpoints, and so on. So, for example, among the things that we did, which on the policy side, was to educate policymakers in areas where if policy was enacted, it could reduce the burden of cancer. So we raised the age of tobacco purchase to 21. And that was a law in the United States that will save 57,000 lives per year, $38 billion in healthcare costs. Wow. One example of many that I can give. We also helped other countries at the same time. In addition, we took big risks. We developed strategies to engineer certain immune cells to defeat cancer, so-called CAR-NKs. And that has been, a major advance as well. Major advances in lung cancer, where patients, 50,000 patients in the United States alone, end up with metastatic disease at the end of treatment. And we developed strategies to help those patients, very specifically increasing their life expectancy by 1 year just from that one intervention. So think about that, 50,000 years of life more, where families could remain intact. So many, many examples, but it was an example that we not only have to discover, we have to do. And sometimes we can't just leave it up to the Brownian motion of progress and hope that the right collisions will happen. We have to be more deliberate. So when Vice President at the time, Biden's son, was being cared for brain cancer, glioblastoma at MD Anderson, I had an extended conversation with the Vice President in my office about what we were doing in the Cancer Moonshot. When Beau Biden passed, it really galvanized the Vice President's desire to make an impact on the cancer problem. And so he took a chapter from our effort and essentially launched the Cancer Moonshot effort when he announced that he wasn't running for president at the time. And then in the final year of the Obama administration, they launched what was the Beau Biden Cancer Moonshot. When he became president, then he was able to have an all-of-government effort to really organize the communities from academia to pharma, and the development of a new institute called ARPA-H, that is essentially like the DARPA of healthcare, to really, again, organize knowledge and convert knowledge into things that can make an impact on patients. So I'm very proud of what my colleagues at MD Anderson did. It was a huge team effort. And of course, very pleased that that President Biden has made cancer a national priority.
Ron, that's a truly inspiring story there. And you said we have to do, and this is we must do for things to happen. And educating, advising all these policymakers for things to happen, it's not an easy task and requires leadership. And you've gave a few names as examples of leadership. You've also advised other leaders like the Pope. What are the key lessons that you've learned from advising policymakers, and how can they shape the future of healthcare and sustainability?
Yeah, I think that I guess perhaps the key to my approach to working with policymakers or individuals of significant impact and influence is to really be a servant and educator. Every policymaker, every leader wants to do good, wants their people to be healthy, happy, productive, great economy, so on and so forth. And there's nothing more central to that than health and well-being. So I think that, one of the approaches that I've taken is to ignore, the politics and really speak to them as human beings that want to do the right thing and do it in a way where you have to understand where the guardrails are for that particular party or individual entity, what they can and can't do, and talk about that. And I had an opportunity to talk to 10 Republican senators in the U.S. Senate about climate change. These are very conservative individuals where that's a very polarizing, discussion. But my approach to that was to talk about what is, incontrovertible, which is the impact of climate on health. Think of pollution and asthma or lung cancer. No one disagrees with that. And so one could, approach a problem in a way that is not necessarily a frontal attack on somebody's political sensibilities, but to really educate them and say, these are some of the things that we need to do to make an impact on health and well-being. And so there's policy, education, and services. And so policy is the single most important lever to impact public health. So think about the restrictions on tobacco, which is the leading cause of preventable death and disease. Many things like that can really make an impact. I've had the privilege of interacting with Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, and there has again open-mindedness, and in particular, Pope Benedict was a PhD biochemist. Many people don't realize just how intelligent and forward-looking he was. And then, of course, Pope Francis has a heart of gold and is a man of the people and wants to also, reduce pain and suffering. So having discussions with him about HPV vaccination, about reducing tobacco, eliminating tobacco sales, which he did overnight in Vatican shops around the world, which is remarkable because that was the number one profit-making, activity of these shops. So it really speaks to how leaders, without exception, want to do the right thing. And what they need is knowledge. And they know from me that it's not going to come with an agenda. It's going to come with, this is the science, and this is what we need to do to reduce the burden of tobacco and UV radiation and many things, right? That policy could make an impact on.
And maybe let me pick on that word impact, as you alluded to it several times, and that resonates a lot. Let's keep here with examples and revisit another important project, Ron. So could you share insights into the Human Cancer Genome Project and its implications, for example, for personalized medicine and sustainable healthcare practices?
Well, perhaps that was one of the most ambitious projects in the history of life sciences. Of course, the very famous one was the Human Genome Project, which was to try to figure out what was the genetic code of a human being. And that started in 1988 under then President Bush, 41. And that took 12 years. And just that one project, which was $3.6 billion, has since returned $1 trillion in economic value. But the value is far greater than the economic. The societal impact on patients and families have been enormous, incalculable. So then, and that took a lot of effort, and that was to sequence one genome. So President Bush, the son, 43, then in 2007, convened an effort, and I had the privilege of serving on as co-chair of the external advisory board for the project. And actually, my wife, Dr. Linda Chin, who is a professor at Harvard, she was one of the 5 people that ran that project. At Harvard, I was known as Mr. Chin. So she's very accomplished. And so that project, which launched, was very forward-looking. It was almost like the moonshot in the sense that when Kennedy announced it, we had nowhere near the technology needed to actually land on the moon and come back safely. Similarly, we knew that if we pushed to try to sequence not one genome, but tens of thousands of genomes, that the creative genius of the community would eventually figure out how to make that possible. And then there was a big breakthrough almost a year after we launched, and the ability to sequence the genome, not costing 3.6 billion, but at this point now costing hundreds of dollars to be able to sequence entire genomes, cancer genomes. And what that did is it gave us the periodic table for the genes that are mutated in cancer and different cancers. And what we've learned is that cancer is not just one disease, but a collection of many, many, many different diseases. There are at least 17 different forms of lung cancer based on the genetic alterations that occur in those specific cancer subtypes. And so what that does is that gives us an opportunity that if you have a particular mutation, there may be a very specific drug against that mutation. And that allows us to develop what's called targeted therapy to the mutation, instead of chemotherapy, which attacks generically all cancer cells, but also normal cells, and can extract a very significant toll on normal health and well-being. So this is a new era of personalized precision oncology, where the right drug is given to the right patient at the right time. Now, in addition to that, there's been a huge advance, Nobel Prize winning advance, in not just thinking about the cancer cell and the genome, but also immune therapy, where you wake up the immune system to recognize that this cancer cell, which is not normal, shouldn't be there. And that has led to a whole new area of immuno-oncology as well. It's an incredibly exciting area in the history of cancer care.
That's super inspiring. And you mentioned the new era, and this is very, very important, the technologies that are being developed. And let's navigate a bit beyond this knowledge, Ron. Maybe back to the basics. Are there things we can do in order to prevent cancer, thinking about lifestyle? Are things you wanted to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think that this is, thank you for asking that question. This is a huge opportunity to reduce the burden of cancer. Notably, 50%, up to 50% of cancers are preventable. Half of all cancers do not need to happen if we simply apply knowledge that we already have. Obviously, do not smoke. If you are smoking, quit and enlist into a tobacco treatment program where the success rates is 45%, self-quit is 7%. So that is number 1, 2, and 3 in terms of what you can do. Second is to exercise regularly, just 15 minutes, only 15 minutes. Nobody has an excuse not to do 15 minutes of exercise. And that alone will reduce the burden of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and Alzheimer's by 14% and increase life expectancy by 3 years. If you do 30 minutes, then you could increase even more your life expectancy and reduce these burden of chronic diseases by as much as 50%. And then diet, eating a proper balanced diet, staying away from processed foods, maintaining good healthy weight, sleeping adequately, and managing stress. If you do those things, you can increase your health span by 10 years and be healthy and active and productive. So it's an extremely important opportunity, and it not just impacts cancer. Those lifestyle changes dramatically impacts virtually all maladies that affect the human race.
That is a huge compound effect in just doing these small steps every day, isn't it? Just amazing.
Doesn't take much.
And Ron, I wanted to go back a little bit also for something that you referred to. You said the Moonshot project didn't have the right technology, was a leap of faith. Then the Human Cancer Genome Project also had that leap of faith there with knowledge, obviously, but technology that had not been developed at that time. We are these days talking a lot about artificial intelligence, and this is the question. How do you see AI transforming the practice of technology and research in healthcare, particularly in the context of cancer research?
You know, I'm a student of history, and if I look back at the last century, there were three elements that really changed the world. The gene, DNA, discovery of DNA sequence, and so on, and the chip, the computer chip, and the atom, quantum physics, splitting the atom, and so on. When I look towards this century and imagine 100 years from now, somebody having this interview, what happened? Okay, so we've gone from just the chip and standard computing to the ability to create learning systems to recapitulate what happens in the human brain with its complexity and so on. And I think that this is a tectonic impact. And it's similarly, gone from genetics to synthetic biology and, changing the genetic makeup of living organisms and so on at will. CRISPR and, gene editing, et cetera. All of these things have really changed the very nature of, the opportunities that exist before us. I think that in medicine, it's going to have a huge impact. For example, we know that 70% of the patients that come to MD Anderson come from elsewhere, and they often 24% come with misdiagnosis. Wow. 38% misstaged. So that's not reading the pathology correctly and not reading the imaging correctly. And so in that context, artificial intelligence already outperforms or at minimally augments the accuracy of radiologists reading a scan, pathologists reading a pathology slide to make the right diagnosis, which is fundamental to knowing what treatment to give the patient. And so I think that immediately that impact is going to be there. Now, the other aspect is that, if you're MD Anderson, you have the ability to have super subspecialists, where not only you go to doctor that sees breast cancer patients, but a particular form of breast cancer, because we see so many patients. But for a generalist oncologist, they may see one leukemia patients per year. And so they need to know what would the world's expert who sees 10 patients per day would do, who's writing the textbooks. MD Anderson publishes over 10 papers per day, scientific papers. It is not humanly possible to keep up with knowledge. So what artificial intelligence can do is take all of that world knowledge and provide decision support for the physician, almost like having an expert behind you telling you that here's the world's knowledge up to date, and this is the options that I think you should consider. And I think that, coupled with the physician's insight, emotional intelligence, common sense, and experience, those together are going to be truly powerful in democratizing world-class care around the world. In addition, digital health and the connectivity, when we think about, the iPhone, for example, this is a portal to allow common citizens to be empowered with knowledge as well, in terms of, they have symptoms or they're on treatment, and it provides opportunities for 24/7 care for patients, again, augmented with artificial intelligence, but I think as importantly, complemented with human interaction. You cannot just simply have technology solutions. Technology gets you 80% of the way there. Then you need, other kinds of strategies that involve human interaction that together could be very, very, very powerful. Maybe someday it will be, a physician, or it might be, dispensable largely. But at the same time, I think it's important for us to think about this as integration, just like we go from a horse to a car to a 747, right?
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. And technology has different shapes and forms. So we were now discussing about artificial intelligence and machine learning, the apps, but it can also have an angle of engineering cells, for example. And there have been advancements in analyzing various cancers in the blood. You just said before, Ron, there are so many different cancers. How do these developments impact early detection and treatment, and what role does sustainability play in this approach, Ron?
Yeah, I think this is actually a very important story. So first of all, the Human Cancer Genome Project, and giving us, the mutations that occur in cancer. Some of those mutations actually occur that you inherit. About 10% of cancers are due to genes that you inherit, that are mistakes that you inherit from your mother or father. So it's important to know that. And so that if you sequence your genome, you'll know that you have a particular predisposition to certain cancers, which you can readily discern. If you go to a physician, they ask a family history, they could say, oh, I have recurrent breast cancer, ovarian cancer, or certain cancers. They will then know to look for those genes. Very important, because then your sons and daughters and cousins and uncles and so on could know that they should be screened and catch those cancers early when the chances for cure is enormous. So that's at the prevention phase. At the treatment phase, the knowledge beyond just the precision therapy that I talked about earlier in targeted therapy, we now have the ability to change the genetic makeup of cells. So cells that fight cancer, T cells, for example, they have a receptor that can recognize a certain target. Now, let's say there's a target on a cancer cell. What we can do is to engineer the T cell to have a receptor that can then go on that particular target. And that can then bring that killer T cell to the doorstep of that cancer cell and kill that cancer cell. This is called CAR-NK. It's a engineered T cell receptor, engineered T cell, where we use a variety of strategies to change the genetic makeup of the T cell in the cancer to attack the cancer cell. So that is a huge advance that has had a big impact on blood cancers, not yet as much in the area of solid tumors, but I think that problem will fall to the axe of science in the years ahead.
And Ron, you've helped creating the biotech industry in multiple countries as well. You've also been involved in initiatives in Portugal. So how do you perceive the biotech industry in this country? And what steps can be taken further to advance this sector in the coming years?
Yeah, I think that there is a huge opportunity. Again, I always joke that no Nature paper or scientific publications have a cure to patient. It's only when you convert that knowledge into a new drug, a policy, or diagnostic that people's lives change. So biotechnology is really converting, the engine that converts this academic knowledge into things that actually help people. So I've been very passionate. And in the wake of my father's passing, I actually started my first biotechnology company that was in precision medicine. And so there, what we have an opportunity to do, and what I've advised various governments, state governments or countries, is to bring, again, in an organized way, what can government do to facilitate biotech, areas of regulation, or even providing governmental support for new companies. And then the other is, what can academic institutions do? I think that we can do a little bit better job in bringing the discoveries to a slightly later stage of drug discovery and so on. And then what can industry do to interact with government and interact with academia? And I think a shining example of how coordinated action could impact is Warp Drive in the COVID vaccine. There you had government, academia, and industry working together to create, an amazing vaccine in 11 months from sequence, which is historic. Because that's an example. So I think that I think it's very important. And actually, I always advise government leaders that really what defines economic vitality is your investment in technology and education. And so this is, I think, very important. They have to create an innovation economy, and biotech and health is central to every country. So that's something. And then in Portugal, I had the privilege of working with the two past presidents, in the current president and President Silva before him, to think about what we can do to impact the cancer problem in Portugal. And so we had the opportunity to convene a group of leaders in Portugal, university presidents and so on, and leaders in the United States in cancer research, to come together and think about what are the opportunities where we could collaborate, work together to make an impact on Portugal. And so as a result of that, we'll be developing a national cancer plan for Portugal. We'll provide opportunities to train promising young talent to come to the United States and go to the very top laboratories and institutions in the United States: MD Anderson, Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Columbia, and so on. And then, come back and make an impact on Portugal and help advance things. So visiting scholars going to Portugal, and Portuguese scholars coming to the United States, again, to exchange knowledge, to think about how we can in a more coordinated way. So it's just at the very beginning of this. I'm actually going to Portugal in a month to begin to help move this process along. And I'm very excited. I hope my dad is smiling down from heaven.
Ron, thank you so much for this fantastic interview, discussion, dialogue. We would like to thank you for your time and availability. Today, we talk with Ron DePinho about creating impact, so many things. So just some that came to our mind. So Moonshot Program, Human Cancer Genome Project, and its implications for personalized medicine. And let's go for a 15 minutes exercise every day, healthy diet, sleep well. I mean, just really take notes of those because they are extremely important. And Ron, maybe the very last question, in case our audience wants to find you online, where can they find you?
Well, I do have a website, and it has, science and biotech and things about health and cancer diagnosis and so on. So it's www.rondepinho.com.
Thank you, Ron. That will be in the show notes. For those that have listened to this great conversation or watched us on YouTube, push the like button if you are on YouTube, or subscribe to our podcast on any app, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcast. That way, more people is able to find these great conversations. You are also invited to subscribe to our newsletter. And Ron, again, thank you very much for your time and availability. Bye for now, and we hope to see you very soon for another episode of CRUZAMENTO Podcast.
Thank you, Ron.
And thank you. It was a lot of fun.